This video is sponsored by the all-in-one website and management software, Odoo. Use my link in the description to get started for free. Today, as always, men fall into two groups, slaves and free men. Whoever does not have 2/3 of his day for himself is a slave, whatever he may be, a statesman, a businessman, an official, or a scholar. Friedrich Nietzsche. We are not defined by what we do, but by what we don't do. Everything we choose to not participate in, to not have, to not strive for, everyone we choose to not spend time with, to not associate with, chisels away at the cement block of possibility and reveals the sculpture of our being. We are so often told that success is an additive process, that we gain it by doing more, having more, and being more. But this is, after a certain point, backwards. Success is largely subtractive. We gain it by removing and blocking more from our life. To be clear, success here doesn't refer strictly to societal or financial achievements. Rather, it refers to having the most preferable experience of the greatest amount of one's time, more synonymous with a sort of satisfaction or happiness in and about one's life. This might include societal and financial achievements, but it does not necessitate them at any specific scale. Of course, what is the most preferable experience of one's time can only be determined by each individual for themselves. But that is part of the problem. For so many of us, we have a certain vision of what success is and what is preferable, not because we truly believe in it, not because we've reflected deeply on it and tested against it, but because it's what we've been instructed and what we've assumed is true. For many of us, we've viewed life from a perspective of lack and assumed success is always an additive process. It is as if we've been sifting for gold with a mesh too fine to let anything pass through. We hold on to everything, believing it's all valuable and good. But in the end, we are left with a pan full of sand and dirt. To return any balance and regain any control over our life, to find the gold, we must flip the whole thing over again and use a filter we've thoughtfully selected, one that lets the sand and dirt pass through. Instead of pursuing more people, more pleasures, more activities, more possessions, and, in some cases, more achievements, we can often find greater satisfaction in life by having fewer of these things. The great pessimist philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer argued that happiness is best achieved not by pursuing pleasure, but by minimizing pain and suffering. He writes, "All satisfaction, or what is commonly called happiness, is really and essentially negative only. That is, it consists in freedom from pain. If we work to eliminate unnecessary sources of stress, anxiety, and harm, we will likely have a greater positive impact on our state of being than if we work toward adding, let's say, a new car or more impressive social schedule." Author and statistician Nassim Nicholas Taleb mirrors this same Schopenhauerian idea. The greatest, most robust contribution to happiness comes from the elimination or reduction of unhappiness, particularly chronic stress, anxiety, and sources of dissatisfaction. The aim here isn't minimalism, or a lifestyle chiefly focused on always living with less. Instead, we might call what we're after here Precisionism, an approach to life that aims for clarity and rigor in choices, in yeses and nos, in what one removes and preserves, all for the purposes of reducing unnecessary noise and potential harm in life. Though this may often overlap with minimalism, the key difference is that Precisionism doesn't seek less for its own sake. Rather, less is merely often a byproduct of being more precise about what one allows or keeps in their life and why. The term Precisionism also appears in art history, referring to a modernist movement in which artists often limit the use of detail, incorporating geometric shapes, clean lines, and stark contrasts of light to create clear focuses and orientations. In these artworks, the limiting of elements, showcasing only what is deemed essential to a subject, does not strip away meaning, but creates it. This is a fitting artistic style to share the term with. We can begin to better determine the essential qualities and details of our own lives by beginning to trust our own sensibilities more. It is often said that, when considering options and decisions in life, if it's not a hell yes, it's a hell no. This is a decent start. When it comes to more basic matters, like whether to buy a new item of clothing, whether to agree to a meeting, whether to go to a social event, or whether to continue reading a new book, this attitude can certainly be helpful. Perhaps for a slightly more precise approach, we might modify it to be, if it's not at least an 8 out of 10, it's a hell no. For more complicated decisions, however, like whether to move, whether to quit or take a job, or whether to start or end a relationship, there are, of course, far more unknown and intricate variables that can rarely be distilled down to a pure hell yes 8 out of 10 reaction. Moreover, things can often be scary and uncomfortable, and we might say hell no simply out of fear or discomfort, even if a yes aligns more with our true goals and hopes. To help better determine larger, more complicated decisions, we might look at how many reasons we have to justify a particular choice. Though perhaps it might seem counterintuitive, it can be argued that the more reasons one uses to justify a choice, the less likely it is to be the right choice. This is because when something requires multiple justifications, it often means there's no single, precise reason, or that the reasons are vague and insufficient, as excessive rationalization often signals doubt, noise, or self-deception. For example, one doesn't need more than one reason to not jump into a lion's pen. It would be absurd for one to say that they shouldn't do this because the lion will likely eat them, and because it's a bit of a difficult jump, and because they're a bit tired today. The less justifications for something, the more likely it is to be the stronger choice. Of course, here too, it is not always that simple. Sometimes there are decisions that are simply too complex to reduce to clear, singular justifications. For example, choosing a treatment for a condition like cancer may involve multiple serious considerations, like survival rate, quality of life, side effects, cost, and long-term risks. Also, sometimes we can easily convince ourselves that a reason is clear out of fear or a cognitive bias. Ultimately, sometimes we will have to make choices blind and accept whatever comes. And sometimes we will make the wrong choices, even with clear sight. It is not a perfect system, and we are very fallible beings. All we can do is try our best. And we try our best by reconsidering the filter through which our decisions are made, adhering to our personal preferences, and considering seriously the subtractive process of success. With all this in mind, we might consider a few specific areas that are potentially worth further sculpting. Less people. How many people do we oblige and stay close with simply because they are there? Of course, there is no universally right number of people to be friends and acquaintances with, but there are certainly wrong people to be friends and acquaintances with, or perhaps put more accurately, wrong reasons to be friends and acquaintances. Proximity, fear of being alone, and the desire for the approval of others are just some of them. For most of us, beyond a certain relatively low number, relationships can quickly begin to feel more superficial, transactional, or distant. And depending on one's goals and preferences, such relationships may offer little value or meaning. The point here isn't some specific number of people or some frequency of social activity. It's about having clarity on which relationships and interactions we choose to invest in and leaving the rest out. Less commitments. How often do we agree to do things simply because we can, because we have the time in our schedule? Or perhaps we agree because we think it could be a good opportunity or it could be fun, and we don't want to let it pass by. Here, we might ask ourselves, what is the opportunity really for? Will even the most optimal of outcomes contribute to what we truly want and value in life? And in the case of fun things that we don't want to miss out on, what metric of fun are we using? Is it something societally considered fun, or something that we are personally interested in or know we enjoy? We should, of course, say yes to both what we can and want to do, if we have the choice, but what is feasible is not always reasonable, and what sounds like fun or an opportunity can easily turn into an obligation or chore if it's not aligned with what we truly want, or if it's stacked on a pile of other opportunities and activities that we never quite have the energy or dedication to enjoy. Less stuff. How many times do we buy the newest phone, laptop, console, or whatever else, merely because it's the newest one? How many times do we buy an item of clothing or a kitchen gadget because we kind of like it? How often do we make serious financial decisions, like going to college or buying a car or a home, because it's just what you do? Look around in your closet, garage, living room, kitchen, bedroom. How much would really be lost if much of it disappeared? Look around at your life. How much of it do you really need to feel the way you always do? Less stimulation. It has never been easier to numb one's brain with the numbing solution of stimulation. With access to nearly everything, we can readily feel and think nothing. That is, nothing of deep personal merit, meaning, or advantage. How often do we feel the need to stay up on all the latest news, shows, and feeds? How often do we really care about what is contained in most of these things? There's nothing wrong with being engaged, being active, or having a relatively busy schedule, but when stimulation is for its own sake, particularly when it's constant, we have likely entered into a hazardous territory, one where we simply seek to distract ourselves from the fact that we have long since let go of the reins of our life. Less concern. By chiseling each of these categories, and perhaps others unmentioned, what we are often left with, if done right, is less concern. We reduce unnecessary sources of anxiety, overwhelm, stress, and detachment and we allow space for both the honing in and incorporating of what we find meaningful and valuable. In the words of Henry David Thoreau, if one advances confidently in the direction of his dreams and endeavors to live the life which he has imagined, he will meet with a success unexpected in common hours. In proportion as he simplifies his life, the laws of the universe will appear less complex, and solitude will not be solitude, nor poverty poverty, nor weakness weakness. Of course, it must be said that not everyone can approach life in this way. For many of us, we cannot easily choose to remove or reduce certain obligations and responsibilities, despite how well they might align with what we value and want to focus on. And for many of us, regardless, our approach to success is, understandably, additive. As it is with all matters of life, it is far from easy or clear what is right. And simplicity can be, ironically, quite complex. But if or when we can view success and satisfaction as a process of subtraction, if or when we are able to reconsider what we allow or retain in our life, we should. We will likely need to try on many versions of life to determine what fits, but we must be willing and eager to return what doesn't. We must worship no and revel in yes. We must work to subtract and sculpt until only our vision for the sculpture of our life remains. And perhaps if we aren't where we want to be, it's worth considering the possibility that we have already run by it. If one of the things you are left with after chiseling away at your priorities is something like working for yourself, working on a passion or art project, or helping socially organize around a value that you care about, you will almost certainly need a website. This video sponsor, Odoo, helps you create one simply, quickly, and professionally so that you can focus on what matters to you, your project or business, and avoid slow, technical, and complicated processes. If, for example, you want to create a web store to sell your art or products, or perhaps you want to create an educational website that shares information on what you feel is important, Odoo allows you to get it up and running in just minutes. All you have to do is fill out a few prompts, choose a color palette, determine the features you want, pick the theme, and then it's a simple drag and drop process until you have exactly what you envisioned. In a way, Odoo mirrors the same process of subtracting away clutter to reveal something beautiful, a fully functioning professional website. And it's free. Odoo offers your first app, including the website builder, completely for free, with unlimited hosting and support, plus a free domain name for the first year. They also offer a full suite of apps for things like accounting, inventory management, project goals, and more, so you can easily build and organize everything in one place. Get started on creating what matters to you for free by using my link in the description. And of course, as always, thank you so much for watching in general, and see you next video.